Thank you everyone for tuning in to our Protect Stage Strategy pre-record. We're going to walk through some updates for you prior to our live Q&A. As always, please watch through the entire video. Sam will talk a little bit about additional items for you to review before we meet, and we look forward to answering your questions. So with that, I'm going to dive in. So today we're going to be talking primarily about Protect, since this is the Protect Strategy review. And as you can see on the right, those are the 4 categories that are now available. We're really focused on security operations visibility, and then of course, longer term, how we then connect the operations side back to the development side. Kind of give you a look as to how everything fits into the DevSecOps lifecycle. Protect has now begun to get in earlier into the process. So if we start here, we've got developers writing code and committing it, with container scanning being part of Protect and the container security team. Protect is now operating as part of that analyze step as well, and we'll have lots of great updates for you here, as well as you can see on the category direction page for container scanning. So scanning is run here. We're also having an auto remediation component to container scanning, which would help with mitigate, of course, as well as all the details to help you identify and resolve the vulnerability. And finally, in the Protect stage, this is the primary focus of the Protect stage as a whole. You have components such as container host security and container network security, helping protect your containerized environment and long-term your cloud native environment. At a high level, I wanted to highlight some of the accomplishments over the last 3 months. So on the container scanning, and this is part of the pipeline, the team has finished the work to support the Trivy analyzer. This will be replacing Claire and CLAR as part of the container scanning category. This cuts over in 14.0, which is actually next month. It is there today behind a feature flag if you want to use it ahead of time. This also leads into our OpenShift support. We're very excited to talk about how in 14.0 with Trivy, we'll be able to support OpenShift for container scanning. And finally, lots of documentation updates. We want to make sure things are easy to use, easy to follow, and the team is very much focused on improving the documentation. On security orchestration, I'm very excited to announce we did reach minimal maturity since last time we had a strategy review. That's very exciting. That was kicked off with the alert dashboard now being available. We've also done lots of follow-on enhancements to the alert dashboard. So please check out the category direction for secure orchestration, as well as the documentation on the alert dashboard. And then finally, we are also finished up our first initial release of the security policy management component. That work is behind a feature flag today. However, we'll be outside that feature flag here shortly. So please check that out. It's very exciting. It's been focused on support with the container security team working with the DAS team on getting DAS scans to be part of that policy enforcement. And then finally, on cloud workload protection, we're doing the work, and this is currently in Spike, for rolling out Starboard to be able to run Trivy as part of a production environment. Again, very exciting work. This is a lot of progress made in the last several months. And of course, this is all due to the hard work of the container security team. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sam, who's going to walk through the details. So with that, over to you, Sam.
All right, thanks, David. Just to provide a brief recap and overview of where we're allocating our resources right now. We have a number of different categories. I like to think of it more in terms of the markets that we're playing in. So first of all, we've got our container scanning category, and I actually split that into 2 components, the pipeline scanning component, and then the component of scanning in production. For the pipeline component, that plays into the SCA market, which is part of the overall AST market, which is really all about making sure that what goes out the door is scanned and clean and ready to go into a production environment. Secondly, there's the security orchestration category. We're putting about 50% of our investment here, plus we just got approval for 1 dedicated engineer to focus on security approvals as part of this. This is really an overlay category that provides uplift to all of Secure and Protect by providing some joint shared functionality to help across the board. And then lastly, we have the cloud workload platform protection market, and that's where we have container scanning in production, as well as our container host and network security categories. Just to provide an overview of the personas that we're dealing with here, We've got the security operations persona, the application security persona, and then your traditional DevOps or even development type personas. And as you can see, I'm mapping these to the different areas in Protect that address those personas. What we're trying to do is build a bridge over to that security operations team. So GitLab is traditionally focused on the DevOps and development teams with secure and the secure stage. That team is focusing primarily on the application security team and would like to really break into that security operations market. So a lot of the features that we're doing in Protect, such as security orchestration and container scanning, those tend to jointly benefit both the security operations and application security teams. And that's what's going to help us to bridge that gap to get that interest of that security operations team in the future. Another way of looking at this is in a bit of a Venn diagram where we've got those two personas coupled with the compliance team. They have a lot of shared jobs to be done here. Ultimately, they're all interested in keeping the company safe from cybersecurity attacks, making sure that the risk for the company is kept to a minimum. In the past with Defend, we were focused very heavily on that security operations team down in the far bottom left. What we're trying to do at this point in time is build a bridge over to that area by focusing on some of those shared responsibilities between the SecOps and AppSec teams. And that includes scanning production containers for vulnerabilities. That's a shared job that they both need to do, as well as coordinating with development to remediate findings. So things like our alert dashboard, our policy editor, and our production container scanning are all going to help us bridge that gap and get that interest of the security operations team market while also fulfilling some of the AppSec team needs. I want to highlight the security approvals feature that recently moved over to the Protect stage. This actually was a feature that previously was owned by Threat Insights. Our board approved budget to hire an engineer to work on this 100% full-time. And as you'll see here in a minute, as part of that vision, we're going to be moving that feature into the security orchestration team and having an engineer work on that 100% full-time, entirely focused on just that area. And just to provide a little bit more context about our vision here, really we see this merging in with the work that's being done today with security policy management. So this would be a new type of security policy. This would be a scan results policy that takes effect after the scans finish running. And that policy will then examine the results of the scans, and based off of the findings there, it's going to optionally take certain action depending on how you've configured your policy. As of today, the security approvals functionality in GitLab is fairly coarse-grained. It's more of an all or nothing approach. And by moving it into this policy editor, it's going to let users get very specific to say exactly what types of scans they're interested in, what level of severity vulnerabilities that they're interested in, and whether or not they want to only have approvals triggered if those vulnerabilities are newly detected or pre-existing and not dismissed yet. They can really customize exactly what they're looking for. So ultimately, we want to move this from where it's at today into that security policy workflow and also make it available not just at the project level, but at the group and workspace level as well. As we start into that, our first step will be a research spike just to figure out what's required to achieve this vision and to start breaking everything into iterative milestone steps. As far as our roadmap priorities go, I've actually taken out a lot of the slides that I've highlighted in the past here. I did update them. They're part of the deck, but I didn't want to recap them to be too repetitive. I did want to highlight this slide though, which shows where we're headed with our policy management work. This is sort of a big matrix of perhaps not entirely everything, but almost everything that we've got, in our vision and in our roadmap plans over the next year or so. Right now, we're starting work for just DASK policies only, and we're working just at the project level. We've released our first pass of pipeline scans, and we're working to add in scheduled scans. Once we get that done, our next follow-on steps would be to extend that to SAST and also to up-level that policy management to the group and workspace level. And here you can also see where that security approvals role is fitting into this broader vision, where they fall into that scan result action policies of letting you define a policy that requires approval as an action. Finally, I just wanted to highlight our 12-month roadmap. Well, all of this is subject to change. Hopefully this gives you a rough idea of where we're headed, both in the next 3 months and also out over the course of the next year. Right now, we're looking to see if we can support scheduled scans for policies. We want to build a UI around that. We also want to extend the alert dashboard to support easier to use Kanban style working view. Container scanning, we're working to use Trivy by default. Although that's been released, it still isn't the default. We're planning to make that happen in the 14.0 release. And finally, we're working to allow you to scan containers running in production and improve the ability to match vulnerabilities there. Any feedback on this roadmap is welcome. It changes rather frequently based off of input from customers. So please feel free to reach out or comment on any of these epics or issues if you have input or feedback. That being said, again, I just want to highlight we have a number of slides that are here in the deck that are not covered as part of the formal presentation because they were covered last time, but I did update all of them, so feel free to review those async. And with that, we also wanted to cover a few questions that have been commonly asked just to precede the discussion for our live Q&A. You're always welcome to ask these again or ask other questions that you've got, but to start off, we wanted just to address some of these commonly asked ones. So actually, my first question is for you, David. Why is container scanning part of Protect when it really is part of the pipeline? It runs as part of the pipeline. All of the other secure scanners run as the pipeline, part of the pipeline. So how did container scanning end up over here in Protect?
So that's a great question, Sam. We get this actually quite often. So we made the strategic decision to move container scanning from secure to Protect so we could have all of our container security features together. Initially, it didn't seem intuitive to everyone. However, as we've begun to deliver on the plans that the container security team has had, example being standardizing on a single engine that can not only just do the scanning of the pipeline, but do scanning in production. And highlighted by you with leveraging Starboard, which is our current spike that's being worked on. This allows us to have a holistic view of the container security market and puts us in line with that container workload platform or protection platform space we want to address. So hopefully, if it's not become more intuitive to everyone over the next couple of milestones as we ship more of the goals that have been defined, we'll begin to see that for everyone. It was a very intuitive decision. The next question is actually something I think you'd be great at answering, Sam. So we commonly get asked, like, how does the security orchestration category and the work with the policies for enforcement and now approvals, how does that work with what the compliance team is doing? And are we collaborating with them? Is there a lot of overlap?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I recently recorded a video on that together with myself and Sam Kerr, who's our product manager for the compliance team. So I'll include a link to that in the description of this video so you can check it out for a full detailed answer. But just to answer your question briefly, we see that merging together with security, with our security policy work. We've taken two different approaches that each have their own pros and cons. And in the end, we want to take the pros of both approaches and bring those together. So our work with the security policy management piece is somewhat restrictive because it's limited only to GitLab scanners. But on the positive side, it has a very clean and easy to use user interface. The compliance team's work is very much the opposite. They let you merge any YAML file into the pipeline and enforce that to run as part of a pipeline. But the user experience is not great. It takes a lot of clicks to set up, and then you have to know how to write a CI file in order to use it. So where we see this headed is basically a joint vision that says, if a pipeline is run for a given branch, you can then just execute a CI script. And this can be a linked file. You can also just put a YAML block here in line. But basically, we're taking the flexibility of what the compliance team has done and coupling that with the usability of the security orchestration team for an overall great experience. So that's our end vision. We're each working iteratively to get there and building some of the foundational building blocks that need to take place behind the scenes in order to make that possible.
That's great. I'm very excited that the teams are working together. I think the more we focus on usability and collaborate, the better that experience is going to be for all of our users. because our users don't see us as protect, container scanning, container security, and there's a compliance team. They see us all as one platform because that's what we are. The final question that we commonly get, and I think it'd be great to answer here too, it might come up in our Q&A, is how did the container security team choose Trivy over even our existing use of Claire and Clar or any of the other open source container scanning offerings that are today?
Yeah, great question, David. We did a pretty extensive analysis as we went into the effort looking at how we were going to start scanning containers running in production. And that really was the initial driver, was that roadmap item of needing to get that production scanning. And we found that Trivy supported that really well. It worked very cleanly. It integrated in a great cloud native way. At the same time, we had a number of challenges with the scanner of Claire in the past. We had a growing backlog of customer bugs and requests that just were not answered, and we were not able to get through all of those in a timely manner. And we noticed that a large number of those could be resolved by moving to Trivy. So we actually did a pretty in-depth comparison of Claire versus Trivy. We also compared Trivy to some of the other popular scanners out there, such as Gripe and a few of the others. And in the end, we found that just Trivy's results were very good. Their language support is excellent. They're extremely responsive in working with us. And at the end of the day, it seemed like it was just not only did it help us get to that end goal of building things and being able to scan in production, but it also basically took care of like 20 customer bugs at the same time and provided for a great improvement to the total security that we could provide for our users.
Yeah, I also am very excited about the fact that you and the container security team are working with the Trivy project to also be able to leverage our own vulnerability research. Because a lot of people don't realize that GitLab has a vulnerability research team dedicated to making sure our scanners are as good as they possibly can be. Because we're commonly known as just using an open source scanner. And so the fact that we're gonna be able to take that intelligence and integrate it into that scanner, it's really gonna make that experience for our customers even better.
Yeah, absolutely. Once we can run Trivy and have it not only bring all of the vulnerability intelligence that comes by default with the open source Trivy, but it can also leverage that intelligence. I mean, that's just going to be a really powerful offering.
We look forward to answering your questions. Look forward to our sessions this week.